Hello everyone, and welcome to SUNUP. I'm Lyndall Stout. We join you today from the OSU Research Station at Marshall to talk about a problem happening right now with cattle and lice.
We kicked cattle on wheat December 7th to be exact, and I started noticing some cattle starting to rub on the fence and getting hairballs up, and that's just a normal diagnosis of lice on the cattle. So it's definitely a problem because it can lead to other problems, cattle rubbing, tearing up fences, tearing up other things. We did have some issues with cattle tearing up hot fence and getting it on a couple ponds, and got them in and poured them, and ever since then we've been doing pretty good, and it looks like it's cleaned up.
Justin, Steve mentioned the cattle rubbing on the fence and some other signs. Is that pretty common?
That's pretty common for this time of year, especially in wheat stalkers like they're talking about right here. We also see it in pastured cattle, but the lice that we see are pretty common about this time of year going all the way through March.
And just to be clear, the lice in the cattle is specific to those animals, right?
Yes, it's very specific. It's cattle lice only. It doesn't get in onto you as you're treating the animals. In fact, they're very host specific. They will not get on you to spread into the other populations. There's 4 main types of lice that get into cattle, 3 that are what we call sucking lice, and 1 that's chewing. Most of what we're seeing right now are chewing lice, and they irritate the cattle, hence the rubbing on the fence and irritation.
And then you see some spottiness on the cows. There's some physical changes.
Yes, there is. You can actually see some spots on the animal where there's no hair from rubbing from lice. And usually that's a sign of just irritation. Even the lice may not be feeding on the animal, but the irritation of that lice crawling all over it causes it to rub against the fence. There are production losses associated with it because of the rubbing. And if you get into sucking lice, there is blood loss. So a general rule of thumb, what we try to do is if there's 10 or more per square inch, you need to treat. Usually this time of year, if you have 5 or more, you need to treat.
Okay. What are the treatment options then? What can producers do?
Yeah, the best treatment option is pour-ons, like your ivermectins, your sidectins. You pour it on the back. We really discourage soaking animals with insecticide this time of year because of the colder temperatures. But that is an option if you do have a warm day and if you have product around. General insecticides that are labeled for cattle will work for them, but pour-ons are usually the best option.
Okay, thanks a lot, Justin. And for more information on treating lice in your cattle, just go to our website, sunup.okstate.edu.
Hi, I'm Al Sutherland with your Mesonet weather report. Cold nights continue to add up. A map of the nights with lows at or below freezing through January 15th goes from the lowest count of 26 at Medicine Park to the highest count of 64 cold nights at Boise City. The colors show the increase in the freezing night count from the light blues in the south and east to the intense dark blues in the northwest. Our precipitation events have been light ones this winter. A rainfall map that catches our last event shows how every Mesonet site recorded moisture, but the numbers for the most part are low. The blue areas received less than 3/4 of an inch of equivalent water. Most green areas came in closer to an inch. The fractional water index map at 10 inches has a lot of green to the south and east. The soils in the green-colored areas have good soil moisture in them at 10 inches. It's dry at 10 inches in the dark brown areas to the west. Dropping down to the 24-inch depth, a lot more of the state is colored dark brown, showing that while there is good moisture in some upper soils, most of the deeper soils are dry and some large areas are dry throughout the soil profile. Gary, what is the latest on our drought status?
Good morning, everybody. Happy mid to late January to you. We're all still here, so that's a good thing. But unfortunately, so is that drought. So let's take a look at the latest U.S. Drought Monitor map, although there is a little bit of good news on there. Quick, focus your eyes on far southeastern Oklahoma, where we actually saw that drought downgrade from extreme to merely severe. It may not sound like much, but it's a start. Unfortunately, we also saw that D4 drought extend farther over into northeastern Oklahoma and a little bit of that extreme drought into central Oklahoma. So a mixed message, mixed bag of tricks across the state for the U.S. Drought Monitor. As you can see on this rainfall map from the Oklahoma Mesonet for December 1st through January 16th, those improvements in the southeast came from about 5 to 7 inches of moisture. Now the northwestern 2/3 of the state only had about a ½ inch to about 2 inches, which is of course better than nothing. But I'm afraid for that month and a half period, we're still below normal over much of the state. It was 1.98 inches averaged across the state, or about 0.8 of an inch below normal. That's the 35th driest December 1st through January 16th since 1921. Now I wish I didn't have to show you this next picture, but the latest U.S. seasonal drought outlook for Oklahoma shows either persistence or intensification of drought through April 30th. Now of course that's not written in stone just yet. We will be getting into our spring rainy season. Hopefully we can get some relief there. But for the next few weeks it certainly looks dry, and then February, at least from this far out, looks dry as well. So unfortunately it does look like that drought's going to persist for a while. As I've said all along, it's absolutely vital that we get back to at least a normal spring rainy season as we get into April through June. So we have that to look forward to, a little bit of hope there. That's it for this time. We'll see you next time on the Mesonet Weather Report.
Kim Anderson, our grain marketing specialist, joins us now. And Kim, last week you talked about those January reports setting the foundation for wheat prices. So now the question, what is that foundation?
Well, that foundation is good. I think they stopped the bleeding, the downtrend stopped. We may be starting a sideways pattern. You look at that report, it was slightly bullish for both corn and wheat. I think it needs to be for both of those commodities. You look at the ending stocks and the quarterly stocks, slightly lower for the wheat and corn than the market expected. You look at the wheat plantings, the all wheat plantings were less than the market expected. Hard wheat acres, less than the market expected. Now, some negative news was the soft red winter wheat planted acres were higher than expected, but overall I think it was good news for wheat, and I think it was good news for corn relative to prices.
Okay, and how are wheat and corn prices impacting each other? It's always important to have perspective on that, right?
I don't think wheat prices can go up by themselves. I think wheat prices need some strength in corn, and as we've talked about, corn export demand has been weak, it continues to be weak, and the corn used for ethanol is less than expected. So there's some weakness in corn, and that's going to hold wheat down a little bit. So, and those two commodities are still tied together.
Okay, let's switch gears, look at some of the foreign markets and where we are in terms of U.S. competition.
Well, India is probably the big news story right now. They've exported about 165 million bushels. They may be looking at their 7th record wheat crop in a row, and they're going to be harvesting in the March through May time period. One report indicated that they will probably export 370 million bushels of wheat next year, and so they're going to be major wheat exporters that we haven't seen in the past. You look at Australia, they were priced a little bit out of the market, a little higher prices. They are now very competitive price-wise, and are making export sales, and competition is stiff there. Some positive news from Russia, at least positive for us. They had some planting problems, slightly less acres than they hoped for, and they possibly got some freeze damage in their wheat. And so that, as we look into the 13 crop year, may be positive for our wheat prices.
Okay, and finally, what are you looking at now with all this in mind in terms of the markets?
Well, the funds have come back in the market, and I think that's one reason that our prices have solidified. I'm watching that March contract. I think it's got a floor at $7.85, and it's got resistance at $8.50. If we could pop that $8.50, we get another 50 cents. If they're watching the July contract, got a floor at $8, the price is up near that $8.50 level. They've got resistance at $8.67. If we can pop out the upside of that $8.67, I think we could get some higher prices for our 13 wheat.
Okay, Kim Anderson, good information. We'll see you next week.
Before this spring's calving season begins, I think it's a good idea to refresh our memories as to what's going to take place during a normal calving, when everything turns out okay. Let's remember that calving is basically broken down into 3 different stages. Stage 1 occurs anywhere from about 4 hours to 24 hours before stage 2, when actual calving takes place. And that's the length of time that stage 1 could last. What's going on in stage 1? Well, from a physiological standpoint, the most important item is the dilation of the cervix. And that's in response to some hormonal changes taking place in the cow that allow for the relaxation of the cervix and begin the contractions then that lead on into stage 2. What you'll see in stage 1, of course, are some behavioral changes in the cow. That's when she might isolate herself, begin to walk along the fence, perhaps twitch her tail, sometimes kick at her belly. And that's a good indication that stage 1 is taking place. Stage 2, that's where all the real action is. Stage 2 begins when we first see the appearance of a water bag or baby calf's feet. And stage 2 is over when the calf is actually physically delivered and completely on the ground. During stage 2, the length of time is very, very important. You know, for years we talked about this could be 2 to 4 hours. Well, data coming from both Montana and here at Oklahoma State has shown us that if this is going to happen in a normal, healthy fashion, stage 2 is actually shorter than that. In the case of the mature cow, the cow that's had calves before, stage 2 ought to last only about a half of an hour. The data would say on an average 22 minutes. In the case of the heifer that's having her first calf, that 2-year-old, she has to, of course, stretch some ligaments, open the pelvic canal a little bit more. This takes longer, and on average, stage 2 of a first calf heifer is going to take close to an hour. The data from the 2 experiment stations actually comes out to about 55 minutes. Stage 3 is going to be the release of the placenta, the loss of the afterbirth, whatever you'd like to call it. This is going to take place in about 8 to 12 hours in a normal situation. If that placenta is not released and stays with the cow for a longer period of time, we have what we call a retained placenta. And that's when you may want to visit with your local veterinarian about how best to handle that situation. One word of caution, I definitely would discourage producers from getting that cow in and trying to manually remove that placenta. We can do more harm than good by doing that. Visit the veterinarian, they'll probably suggest some antibiotic treatment, and this particular situation can take care of itself in that manner. We think it's a good idea that if you understand all these 3 stages, then you'll be a little better prepared to look for abnormal situations during this calving season and know how to best provide the assistance that could be necessary. Hey, we look forward to visiting with you again next week on SUNUP's Cow-Calf Corner.
As we get a little further into 2013, forages remain scarce and inputs remain high for cattle producers, meaning they need to squeeze every dollar they can out of those animals. Here to talk about that and help us figure out some strategies for success, Gant Maurer, our beef value enhancement specialist here at Oklahoma State University. Gant, you say really the first place to start is with record keeping.
Yeah, absolutely, Austin. Without proper records in a cow herd, it's hard for us to decide which cows we need to keep, which cows that we need to cull, and it doesn't have to be very invasive. It doesn't have to be very hard to do. At least get the when the calves are born, what cow that calf is out of, and we need to know if that cow has actually calved, and if she's open, we need to get her on down the road to save any type of forage we can. Also, Austin, we need to keep those records in case we need to use them further on down the road in some type of marketing program. Okay. And it's always important, the more information we have on our cow herd, the more value we can add back to that cow herd.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, of course, you say when you have those records, though, it can actually change your management practices and let you have a more valuable behaviors.
Absolutely. Once we see a lot of times when producers start collecting calving data or weaning data, we actually start having a more of a condensed calving season, and when I mean more of a condensed calving season, a 90-day calving season or less. And what this allows us to do is have more uniform calf crops and bigger lots of calves to sell when we take those calves to market at the sale barn. And oftentimes, we might even try to shrink that calving season to say a 42 or a 63-day calving season, just to improve reproductive efficiency in that cow herd.
All right. Now let's talk about some of the things you can actually do with the cattle as opposed to with record keeping and so on. Let's start with supplements. Supplements, vaccinations. I mean, these are things folks might want to cut back on a little bit considering the cost, but really that can be kind of detrimental.
Absolutely. What we found out this year, especially with the drought, our cows are not receiving the types of minerals and nutrients that they typically receive in a normal year in Oklahoma. And what we're seeing in grower yards and feedlots, we're seeing increased death loss, and in some points up to 8 to 10% death loss. And this can be detrimental in our cow herd, in our profitability. And so we need to do anything we can to allow those calves to do well and have quality cattle for the next producer going on down the line. And like you mentioned earlier, this might be using a mineral program, having a mineral program in place to try to increase nutrients in that calf, and also vaccination programs are second to none in terms of increasing or decreasing morbidity and mortality with those calves coming into the feedlot.
All right, talk a little bit about implants.
Yep, implants along with ionophores are cost-effective means to increase efficiency within those calves. If you don't have a marketing plan in place, or a producer doesn't have a marketing plan in place that is a natural or organic program, they need to really consider using an implant or ionophore. An implant costs about $1, and we typically see a $10 return on an investment. And similarly, an ionophore we can feed at 100 to 200 milligrams a day, and it costs about 2 cents a day. And we can increase efficiency in those calves anywhere from 8 to 20%. So very cost-effective means to be able to supplement those calves in that way.
All right, now on another note, those we're putting a little bit of money in to get some money out. Some things you can do that don't really require the monetary inputs to your cattle, say castration, dehorning, things along that nature.
Yep, absolutely. When these calves go through the sale barn, year after year, a bull calf receives about a $3 to $6 a hundredweight discount compared to a steer calf, and it doesn't take much time, and it's to castrate a calf, and it's not very invasive if we do it young enough in that calf. If we decide to castrate that calf at weaning, that calf will go off feed a little bit. So we need to consider doing it earlier at birth or maybe at branding when we give that first round of vaccinations. And Austin, similarly with dehorning, we see anywhere from a $7 to $10 discount in horn cattle going through the sale ring, and we need to dehorn those calves as early as possible to reduce stress and keep those calves on feed as we come through a weaning program.
Now, I guess one of the important things is once you're thinking about all these things, the idea is to have a plan in place before those calves hit the ground so that then you can look at the preconditioning programs, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Now is the time to start thinking about that as those calves are hitting the ground in a spring calving season. Or we may have some fall calves that calved in August and September, and we're going to think about weaning them this spring. We can kind of incorporate these management practices, put them together, and maybe enroll those calves in a program like Oklahoma Quality Beef Network, the VAC 45 program that we offer here at Oklahoma State University, or many other programs. And when we do that, it's a very cost-effective, cheap method to market those cattle. And what we're really doing is we're telling buyers, hey, we have done this, we have quality cattle, and we have added value to these cattle. And typically, we're seeing anywhere between a $6 to $10 hundredweight premium for those calves over a non-wean type calf.
All right, good information as always. Gant Maurer, the Beef Value Enhancement Specialist here at Oklahoma State University. And if you'd like to know more about any of the topics we discussed today, you can find links on our website, sunup.okstate.edu.
Hi, welcome to Shop Stop. Today we want to spend a little bit of time talking about O-rings and selecting those.
Okay, so you go to the O-ring selection and it says a dash number. So what does that mean?
Well, the dash number has an indication of both the inside and the outside diameter, as well as the width of the O-ring itself. So if you know what you need, you can look that up in the table, find the dash number, and then go to the bin and get it.
Yes, well, if you go to any catalog, typically they use dash numbers to size their O-rings. They won't have these charts, so you can go online and look up these charts for diameter, cross-section area, cross-section of your O-ring, and then the OD, and you can find the proper O-ring for that shaft or whatever it may be.
So just a few tips on how they index or how they designate O-rings, that so you can start to try to find those online or at your store.
Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on Shop Stop.
Timber harvest and forest regeneration are important considerations for managing white-tailed deer in the eastern part of the state. There's two basic ways to approach it. We can do an even-aged harvest, or an even-aged management, or an uneven-aged. Both of these can work for whitetail depending on how they're applied. Now, an even age is basically a forest stand where all of the stems, all the biomass is the same age. It regenerated at the same time. The best way to think of this is a clear cut. When we come into an area and cut everything on a site, you'll get some seed germination, but a lot of those trees are simply resprouting from the roots, particularly with a lot of our oaks. And so what you'll end up with is all of the stems are virtually the same age. And we also see this a lot in commercial pine production, where we have loblolly pine and they're all planted at the same time and all harvested at the same time. Now, for a few years after a clear cut, this produces a lot of really valuable browse. And this is woody plants that are low, within the reach of deer. Some of these are really important deer forages. We also get a lot of soft mass production, all right, things like persimmon. But over time, these clear cuts grow out of the reach of deer and the productivity is a little limited. And before those oaks start to produce hard mast again, there might be a period where it's not quite as productive for whitetail. So if you're going to do even age stand management, the important consideration is to not treat vast areas at once, or not harvest vast areas at once, but try to do blocks, maybe 20 acres, 100 acres, or 200 acres, somewhere in that range. Deer have large home ranges, so the blocks can be fairly large, but if you clear cut 5,000 acres at once, there's going to be a period after maybe about 15 or 18 years where the forage potential is limited on that site. Now, the other type of management is uneven age stand management. And this is basically trees of various ages. And you're essentially, to create that, you've went in and you selectively cut certain trees or groups of trees. And so you might have gaps in the forest where you're getting regeneration, but you'll have an overstory of older trees. This is kind of a good hedge because you have some browse production, some soft mass production, and herbaceous production, but you also have retained hard mass producing trees like oaks. The thing you need to be careful about if you do a selective cut like this is to make sure you don't high grade your timber. Not only will this be detrimental to wildlife, but it'll be detrimental to the timber value if you're trying to market this timber down the road. So you need to hire a professional consulting forester to make sure you're taking out the trees that need to be taken out. Just taking out all the large trees is not necessarily going to yield a good forest down the road, because a lot of these smaller diameter trees could be the same age. They're just stunted. So don't assume that age is always related to size of tree. And a forester can help you make those determinations so that your land is productive for wildlife and also productive for timber production.
Finally today, a way for farmers to keep farming, even if age, a health issue, or something else is slowing them down.
66-year-old Joa Kaoyang is pretty proud of his vegetable farm.
Cucumber, zucchini, squash.
He and his wife grow more than 40 varieties on a few acres in Rogers County in northeastern Oklahoma. However, Vietnam is their native country. They fled in 1976 with their 5 children.
So we had to get out.
They made a new home and new lives in the U.S. Now retired, they supplement their income, growing veggies to sell at the Tulsa Farmers Market. But age and other health issues are slowing them down. So they looked for guidance from the Oklahoma AgrAbility Project.
The AgrAbility Project is a USDA-funded grant that partners with Cooperative Extension and a nonprofit disabling organization.
Sandra Stevenson is the AgrAbility Project Manager.
I'm the one that gets to go out to the farms across the state of Oklahoma and conduct farm assessments. And so I'll work one-on-one with the farmer and the rancher or family member, hired hand that may have an injury, illness, or disabling condition. And we'll walk the farm and look at tasks and obstacles and barriers and identify accommodations, assistive technologies that will reduce those obstacles so the farmer can keep farming.
For the Yangs, Sandra identified several key areas to improve, like installing a shade shelter over the growing areas to allow them to work longer hours on hot days, adding irrigation lines so they no longer need to carry water in buckets or drag hoses, and wider crop rows so Mrs. Yang can better navigate her scooter while still working. There's also this special table to help Mr. Yang load the vegetables onto his truck. The Yangs are just one example of many people who are still productive in Oklahoma thanks to the AgrAbility Project.
Sometimes just a little extra, an outside opinion, someone looking in from the outside can say, well, here's an idea, and have you thought of this maybe? And oftentimes that will be the key, the trigger that will kind of open those doors to trying something new, something a little easier, being nicer to our bodies as we work.
As a result, it looks like the Yangs will continue to grow their vegetables for many years to come.
For more information on the Oklahoma AgrAbility Project, we've set up a link on our website, sunup.okstate.edu. That does it for us this week. Remember, you can see us anytime online and also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. I'm Lyndall Stout. Have a great week, everyone, and we'll see you next time at SUNUP.